they provided the best experience for the employees within their environment. That's what we did with the nonprofits. And then just our key takeaways were, definitely preparing employees for positive experience, set expectations, answer questions, prepare the nonprofits, communicate as much as you can internally and externally. We try to follow up when possible with the nonprofits. We'll send them some photos, some quotes. So if they have an e-newsletter or a blog and it's easy for them to mention us and it's appropriate, then we've done a lot of the work for them. Our future plans, still encouraging team building, trying to get this instilled more in some of our other site communities, and we are incorporating a team grants program this year where groups of employees can apply for funds in honor of their volunteer work and working closer with HR. So there you go. I know I went through it rather quickly, but I know we have two other great speakers also.
That's great, Karen. A lot of really great ideas in there. I love the one of setting expectations for those of us who are heading out of the company and going to the nonprofit. Okay, here's what you can expect, here's what will work, and here's what won't work. And then I love that you actually got the nonprofit to connect the employees, the volunteers, to the outcomes, to explain why what they were doing is important and what the effect of it would be. Absolutely, and there's a bunch of other great ideas in there. Those were two I quickly jotted down. But thank you so much, Karen. That's excellent. Jeanette, I was wondering if you could build on that a little bit. And I think you're going to talk to us about skilled volunteering. And there's an aspect in which you added a very unique component when we talked about putting people in skilled positions where they were going to take advantage of their skills with a nonprofit. Can you share that with us?
Of course, thank you. My name is Jeanette, and I represent Humana. I work at the Humana Foundation, and I manage the volunteer program. And we have a professional development program in our Louisville office for recent graduates, and it's called Infusion. And they wanted to incorporate into their program an element of giving back to the community. So they wanted to get professional development while giving back. So it seemed to work well with the concept of skills-based volunteering. And we sent an RFP out to about 300 different nonprofits in Louisville, where we're headquartered, and got back some requests from the nonprofits about what they could benefit from internally so that they can better serve their members. So it had to be something very internal that maybe they didn't have the staff support to bring to fruition. So they selected 3 projects, and just to give you an idea, one was to help build up their evaluation protocol and data tracking system, and the other one was to establish a marketing plan for their nonprofit so that they can increase awareness in the community about what they do. And when they started that relationship, it was one that the foundation already had a relationship with those 2 nonprofits just through grant making, but the employees didn't necessarily know very much about them. And beforehand, they met and they talked, and they established an agreement about, okay, this is what the nonprofit wants, and this is what we hope to accomplish. But really looking back, I think that, and when we go forward, what would have been better is if the employees went through kind of a dating phase, that's what I like to call it, where they just commit immediately to a 6-month-long skills-based volunteer project, but they would kind of explore the different nonprofits in the area first and get a connection with a particular nonprofit that really appealed to them, and then work from there, and after that figure out, okay, can we establish a team of people who also feel connected to this nonprofit, and it would have to also be something that the nonprofit really needed and wanted, like I said before, because they may not have had the resources to make it happen. But both parties, both our employees and the nonprofit, seem to really benefit, and I just think that if we had a little bit more of a transition phase before we jumped into a relationship, it would have been a little bit easier. But I definitely agree with everything that was said before about the good communication and setting expectations and all of that. Also, definitely applies to this situation too.
Thanks, Jeanette. When we were talking yesterday, I thought that was a brilliant idea, because when I'm talking about volunteering with people, I'll say, when nonprofits ask for a 2-hour commitment every week for 6 months, it's a bit like showing up at the door of someone who, it's a blind date, and the person shows up with the prenups and says, okay, glad you're here, let's sign up. This relationship's going to last for 6 months. Or, you want to get to know who you're with. And if you're ever going to take advantage of very personal, self-interested motivation, people have got to be able to discover, is this for me or not? And then nonprofits got to be able to discover, are they for us or not? Otherwise, we can end up inoculating an entire generation against ever contributing civically or through volunteering, because they'll have a bad experience and say they tried and never go back. Samantha, why don't you share with us a little bit from your experience?
Yes, I'm with Centocor Orthobiotech, and we're a division of Johnson & Johnson. And Johnson & Johnson is working with, the Farm Division of Johnson & Johnson is working with Seton Hall University and the Volunteer Management Center, which are both local in New Jersey. And they, together, Seton Hall and Volunteer Management Center, developed the Board Leadership Institute, so we call it the BLI. And the BLI is a development program that teaches people about nonprofit governance, how to be an effective board member, and provides an opportunity for those participants to experience life as a board member, so kind of what they're getting into if they sign up. So a small satellite program was run for the finance department at one of our operating companies, because usually those programs are run out of Seton Hall. And so a small pilot program was done at our finance department at one of the operating companies last year, and this year we're looking to expand that program, and we're opening up participation to all employees in our farm division this year. And because we're all located in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, logistically that works for us in terms of planning. So participants must apply, and it's competitive, and must have already demonstrated a commitment to community service. And these are the kind of people that we're looking for the next step in their development and the next step in how to be engaged in their community. So once accepted, these participants will complete 5 afternoon sessions covering topics like financial oversight, resource development, corporate and nonprofit cultures, how to run an effective board meeting, and marketing and public relations. And once they complete that coursework, they get a certificate, and then they carry out a 1-year board internship with a nonprofit of their choice that's local in their communities, because a lot of our employees live far from their office. And they're to be fully participatory in that role in an advisory capacity, but they don't have any voting rights, so they're not a full-fledged board member yet. They're just an intern. And then once all the participants in the program successfully complete this requirement, some from our pilot program are still serving in a board capacity. So they've actually moved on from board intern to board member, and they're actually helping to make decisions and shape the mission of that nonprofit and help them with their day-to-day finances, marketing, et cetera. And we also help with recommendations for placement for people who aren't quite sure what organization they want to work with, or because we get a lot of people who come from rotational programs who aren't local in the area. So we, of course, are a resource to help place them in organizations that meet their interests as well. And the benefits are really twofold. From the company and from the personal side, we're developing the skills of our employees to be effective leaders. And the NGO is getting the great skills of our employees as they serve on their nonprofit boards. So if somebody's expertise is in marketing or finance, they obviously can help impart their knowledge and share in those areas and help out on any projects that they have ongoing. So it's really a win-win for everybody, and employees can use this as a development opportunity, and again, the nonprofits are gaining an expert and filling a gap that they would have otherwise needed to fill on their board anyway.
Okay, absolutely excellent, Samantha. Thank you so much. I love the, besides the obvious advantage of good at opportunity to develop soft skills or even some hard skills for your organization. You mentioned this, there's a phrase we use, don't treat all your employees the same. Don't treat them all equally. Some people coming in for the first time just need to experience it and kind of get oriented, but other people are ready for more. And the thing that we do with our employee volunteers, or our volunteers in general, is we tend to take the most committed and use them in the most mundane way. That creates burnout. Yeah, sure, Bill's always going to be here, but that's not a good enough reason to always ask him to sweep up at the end of the day. Bill is always there for very personal, highly motivated reasons, and he needs to be required to do more, harder, more leadership type work. That's going to develop his commitment. And so by offering sort of a higher level of ask for your employees and putting them in these higher levels of commitment, I think you're able to really leverage those very personal motivations, and I can absolutely see what this program is paying off for you. So thank you for sharing that, Samantha. I appreciate that. Okay, Megan, back to you for some questions, I think.
Yeah, no problem. Chris, this has been great. I'm just going to take us back a few slides and remind the audience that you can type in questions, and we will pose them to Chris. So, Vicki, if you have any, here's just some quick instructions. Anyone in the audience would like to type in a question, and we'll have a short discussion with Chris.
Sure, and we've gotten a couple of questions in. So we've got quite a few, both nonprofits and corporations on the call, and there's been a question from one of the nonprofits to the corporations, and maybe we'll start with Samantha on this one. If when you get a call from, or when you're talking to a nonprofit asking about perhaps a larger event and they're unable to accommodate your request, if that sort of turns the company off from that nonprofit at all?
Yeah. Not at all, and we really take the attitude that we'd rather, again, what Chris is saying, and just reiterating that, we'd rather take the attitude that you're upfront and honest that it probably isn't the best time to be working with you guys, but we'll call you in a couple weeks when we have another project coming up, or give me a call when you know that you're going to have another project that you can need volunteers for. So not at all. Again, we'd rather you be upfront and honest with us so that we're not sending employees to do work that doesn't need to be done and they don't feel productive, and the nonprofit also isn't gaining anything from that experience.
Great. And then also a quick question for Karen. There's been a couple of requests if you can share that team building memo and questionnaire that you send out to your different departments. Sure, I definitely will. I can follow up with you guys at VolunteerMatch, and then you can forward it out.
Perfect. And then for Chris, there's been a couple of different questions just, with various people that you've sort of hit the nail right on the head with, those large days where companies want to get involved in the community but perhaps only have one day and 500 employees or some large group. I'm wondering if there's one or two pieces of advice you can give to both the nonprofit as, kind of what their response could be, and also to the corporation on how to rethink those types of events.
Great question. It's a chance to step back and think about the way the world is now. Corporations are going to want to bring employees to volunteer, and they're going to have a lot of them, and they're going to tend to want to do it all at once. That's just the way it is. No matter how much we wish it wouldn't work that way or we don't think it should, that's the way it is. What can we as a nonprofit do to create that kind of space or opportunity? Now, you don't have to be able to accommodate all 500 at once. You can meet the business halfway. So, area in your organization where you can offer an experience, something where you won't need volunteers for it to happen, but something where you can put a lot of people into play. For example, I'll just give this real quick example. There's an organization here called Evergreen, and they do some work in the environment. But they have this volunteering opportunity around a farmer's market on Saturday mornings, and they take in 10 volunteers. They could actually use 50 to 60 volunteers. They could have someone going around handing out information. They could have someone going around just sort of cleaning up. They could have people with T-shirts just mingling, talking to some of the people who are coming to tell them about Evergreen. They could have little science areas for kids where they tell them, because it's this great location, where they tell them about the pond, or they tell them about the hill, or they tell them about what kind of tree this is. There's always ways to create work and become less efficient. Nonprofits aren't usually used to thinking about being less efficient, but in this case, it's wonderful because you give people a chance to volunteer, to get involved, and if they don't come back next week, you can fill that spot on an ongoing basis. But if you don't have it, you don't have it either. People aren't going to go without food, and some really important function is not going to happen. On the business side of things, businesses can get used to working with nonprofits to create those kind of opportunities. So instead of cherry picking the opportunities, sort of hunker down and say, okay, let's think about this. Let's think about what it takes to create the kind of opportunities we need for employees. This is absolutely important. It's not just an event. It's not a Sunday school picnic. This is going to be an important part of what we do, and we need to treat it with that level of severe thinking as well. So let's find a nonprofit that can do this with us. Maybe it is the one big event. Maybe you can find a nonprofit big enough for that. But maybe it's working with nonprofits to create that kind of ongoing experience where you can say to your employees, listen, all year long, you can go to Evergreen on Saturday in the morning. Tell us if you're going to do that. We can arrange, yada, yada, yada. We can set up the parameters to make it possible for you to do that. But you work with this organization to create that kind of space for your employees and then start to reap the benefits of that.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris. And there's quite a few questions in here that we probably won't get to all of them, but what we'll plan to do is pull all the questions that we don't get to and have all of our participants give their perspective on it and then include that in a summary that we send out to everyone. So rest assured that we'll get to your question, if not now, then after the call. And there's been quite a few questions, Samantha, on the board seat that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to just kind of summarize two of them. One was, does Johnson & Johnson or Centocor fund the board seat for those participating in the program? And then also, do you or how do you measure the leadership gains of the participants?
Johnson & Johnson does not fund the board seats. Our contribution is our employees' time and expertise, and we're pretty strict about that. And in terms of measuring leadership gains, because the program is so new, I anticipate that being an outcome from this larger session. So that's probably to come.
Great. And then we're just coming up on the hour, so Megan, if you want to sort of wrap things up.
Yeah, so thank you again, Chris, and all three of our client speakers. It's been a great session, and for those of you in the audience, please return to the Best Practice Network page on the VolunteerMatch website for a downloadable copy of Chris's presentation and also to register for the next upcoming webinars. And sign up for our newsletter. You can also get industry information, research that way. So Chris, thank you again, and everyone have a great rest of your week.
My pleasure. Great to be here.